Hi everybody, this is Lucy. I'm going to tell you a story today, a true story of something that happened to me. First of all, I'm going to introduce you to this lady here, Gladys, who is wearing her protective mask in case she needs to go out to the supermarket. And of course she would wash her hands and keep 2 meters away from everybody. So public service announcement there. And anyway, the reason she's here is because she is the sparkliest thing in this room, and I thought it might be nice to have that as a background rather than just this plain drab brown curtain. So anyway, my story. About 7 years ago, something like that, I was doing a continuing education course called the Sedona Method in Arizona, in a place called Sedona, Arizona. And I'm a psychotherapist, so I do quite a lot of this continuing education. But this was a course that I'd really wanted to go on for a long time. And finally, I got the chance to go. And so I was very excited and threw myself wholeheartedly into this emotional releasing course and loved it. Anyway, throughout the course, in the breaks, this story is not about the course. Throughout the breaks, people would meet up together and for dinner as well. People would meet up and we'd discuss the course, but there was an ongoing theme of people talking about this thing called the Arizona-Sedona Vortex, or vortices, which I think is the plural of vortex. And I was quite curious because I'd never heard of a vortex before. I didn't really study physics, so maybe it's something that you would know about if you were in physics classes, but I'd never heard of it before. So I was quite intrigued, and people were talking about how the vortices had an energy, an electromagnetic energy, and also some people were talking about a spiritual energy that was really powerful. And throughout the week, some people who had brought a car along, they drove up to one of the mountains where you could experience the vortex, and then they would come down, and some people would say didn't experience anything, and other people would just say yeah, it was really powerful. And so anyway, I was really curious. So on my last day, I had about 3 hours after the end of the course before dark, and I thought, I am going to race up the nearest mountain, walk there because I didn't have a vehicle, and I'm going to race up there and go and experience the vortex, and then I can tick that off that I've done the vortex. So I set out, and the first thing I realized was that I had not brought along any suitable footwear. In fact, I'm going to show you the kind of footwear I had. This is a clog, very comfortable on pavements and flat land. In fact, it's what nurses wear in hospitals to make sure they don't skid if there's blood and stuff like that in the operating theatre. Sorry, that was a bit of a gory aside. So getting back, my shoes were not suitable for going up the mountain, but I didn't have any choice. So I started going up the mountain, and I was going up pretty quickly, and there were lots of people coming down because it was getting dark, and it was definitely not recommended to be hiking on this stony, quite steep mountain when it was dark. So every time somebody came down, there were usually groups, quite a lot of Japanese tourists, but people from all over the world had gone there. And I'd ask them, so what did you experience? Did you feel the vortex? Or how do you do it? And pretty much everybody that I spoke to, very disappointingly, said, no, we did not experience the vortex. And so anyway, I arrived up at the mountain, and by this time it was really starting, the sun was setting, and it was starting to get a little bit darker. And I looked around and saw how amazingly beautiful this was. And I felt, well, even if I don't experience the vortex, this has been an amazing hike and quite a treacherous one. So I'm feeling like I did pretty well to get up there in these cloggy shoes. Anyway, I arrived there and there were about 15, 20 people there in groups, in couples, a few people on their own. And so I went round in my journalistic style asking everybody, excuse me, could you tell me, have you experienced the vortex? I must have been quite annoying to some people, but they all seemed to be chattering along and taking photos and just generally chilling out, so maybe they didn't mind. But I was determined to do this vortex thing. So anyway, everybody, again, pretty much everybody, I think, said no. They hadn't experienced it, but they didn't mind. They thought that it was probably just psychobabble and just, you know, woo-woo, nothing real. But still, it didn't matter because they had experienced this amazing view and this incredible sunset with colours of red, yellow, purple, just spreading throughout the whole of the horizon with beautiful red mountains all around. So I just wandered around and kind of enjoyed the atmosphere, and gradually people started disappearing. And I don't mean that they literally disappeared. Now that would have been very cool and magical, but no, they started disappearing down the mountain. So walking off down the mountain, not literally disappearing. So finally, there was just me, and there was one other lady who I'd not managed to speak to because she was a little bit away from the main group, and she was sitting cross-legged with her hands in meditation position, open palms, and her eyes were closed. And so I thought it was not really very appropriate to go and disturb her meditation, so I didn't. And then she stood up and she looked very elegant with a long grey plait, and she was carrying a little mat that she was sitting on, and she looked radiant, very beautiful and strong, powerful woman, and she was smiling. And so I thought, okay, I can go and ask her now. So I went and I said to her, excuse me, have you experienced the vortex here? And she laughed and she said, oh yeah, I come here every day and I experience it every day. And I said, but how come you've experienced it? Because every single person that I've asked, and I must have asked about 30 different people or groups of people, they all said that they didn't experience anything. And she just laughed again and said, oh, well, of course they wouldn't experience anything because they've come in groups and they've come taking photos. The thing to do to experience the vortex is to be on your own, and you have to be in silence, and you have to clear your mind, and you have to be patient. So I thought, okay, this is exciting. This is the first little hint of how I might be able to experience the vortex that I've had. So I said goodbye and thanked the lady, and she disappeared off, again, not literally. And I sat very near to where she had sat, actually, because I thought if she's experienced it there, maybe I'll experience it in the same place. So I was kind of not on the exact spot that she was, because that would have been a little bit, I don't know, intrusive, but right next to it. And I just sat there in a meditative pose, closed my eyes, and just allowed all my thoughts to start to settle down and to clear. And I just breathed as she'd instructed me to, just gently. And I didn't try and force anything, because she'd instructed me not to force anything. And just waited and waited. And after a while, I felt really quite peaceful. And I did peek and open my eyes a few times because I didn't want to miss the actual point, the moment of the sunset. And I felt this has been amazing. Even if I haven't experienced any vortex, this is just so beautiful. And I feel so peaceful. This has been worth it. Anyway, I carried on sitting there and just felt really calm, really lovely, really connected with nature and with the mountain. And then, kind of suddenly, in a big wave, I felt this huge energy pushing me backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, and sometimes in almost like a circle, like this. And I was moving. I don't know how long it was for. Could have been a minute, could have been 10 minutes, because the experience was kind of timeless. But while I was being moved by, I guess, the vortex, I had a sense of being deeply, deeply connected with the mountain and with nature. And the energy from the mountain and from nature was coming up through me and into me and all around me. And I felt, not only do I feel peaceful, but I had a really profound knowing, not just a realization, but a deep knowing that I am peace. And there were other feelings as well that I'd been feeling before that point. I feel love, but during this moment of the vortex energy, I felt I am love. And that was a profound shift for me, and it felt amazing. And so I did get to feel the vortex, which was my goal. So finally the vortex subsided, and I felt amazingly positive and lucky and full of energy and rejuvenated almost. And I stayed there for probably a little bit longer than I should have done, because it was rapidly getting darker and darker and darker. And I kind of had forgotten how treacherous this mountain was and how stony and slippy it was. But I just couldn't move away. But finally, I disappeared down the mountain. I walked down the mountain, and fortunately I did not slip. In fact, slipping down the mountain was the last thing on my mind. I felt so energized, so powerful, so loving, blissful and peaceful. So that is my story. So the moral of this story, if a story needs to have a moral, is find your vortex. You don't need to go to Sedona, Arizona, I've discovered, to find it. You can find it through meditation on your own, or more powerful, in nature. If you find a beautiful tree and meditate with the tree, or a flower, or just the grass, or just looking at the sky, you can find your vortex. So do it, find your vortex. And in these times of stress and confusion with this virus that's threatening lots of people's lives, I think the more that we can find that sense of peace and calm within ourselves, the more that we can share that with others and bring a kind of a togetherness, a connection between human beings that perhaps has been lacking in the past. Well, not perhaps, that has been lacking. Connections between countries, connections between people from different backgrounds, different religions and so on. But when you're in the vortex, when you're in this state of bliss, then all of our differences just melt away, and we realize that we are peace. So that's the end of my story and my little moralizing thing at the end. I'd like to say goodbye to you, and I would like you to say goodbye to Gladys, and thank you, Gladys, for being there as a nice glittery background for us. Now, if anybody wants to share a story, any kind of story, it doesn't have to be profound, or it doesn't have to be true. It could be a made-up story or a folk tale, or it could be an autobiographical story or a biographical story. Please do get permission of the person whose story you're going to tell, if it's a biographical story. But all of your stories are welcome. We do have a screening process to make sure that they're all suitable for children. But please do send us in your video stories and also written stories, and we will put them on the website so they can all be shared by people around the world. Thank you and stay safe.